we have a lot of lawsuits coming out of the atheist community. First, we had the non-sex show. Now we have David Silverman versus Matt Dillahunty and American Atheist. This is a lawyer's dream. My name is Nate Broady, lawyer turned YouTuber, and you are now a part of the Brody's Bunch, where today you're going to be the joy for today's content. Now, the action we're going to be looking at today is David Silverman versus American Atheist, Matt Dillahunty, BuzzFeed, and others. Now, for all of you who don't know who these people are, here's a very quick intro. David Silverman is the former president of American Atheist. He's famous for debates with Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and many other things. He was fired as president of American Atheist in April 2018. American Atheist is a nonprofit organization in the United States which is dedicated to defending the civil liberties of atheists and advocating the complete separation of church and state. American Atheist is an activist group. Matt Dillahunty is the host of the Atheist Experience and a board member of American Atheist. Rose Sinclair is a woman who met Mr. Silverman at a convention and accused him of sexual misconduct in a BuzzFeed article. Presswood is the wife of board member Matt Dillahunty and also accused Mr. Silverman of sexual misconduct. BuzzFeed is a publication. Just go Google it. You'll see who they are. And Mr. Silverman also sued some other board members of American Atheist. Now, before we dive into the lawsuit, let's look at some of the alleged facts so we can understand the lawsuit in a proper context. So first, April 7th, there was an internal complaint regarding violations of the administrative policies of American Atheist. Again, this is an allegation. Now, American Atheist did put out a statement that this first allegation was for violations of American Atheist policies, including allegations of undisclosed conflicts of interest, as well as breaches of confidentiality and staff management guidelines. Now, on April 8th, the board of directors unanimously voted to place President David Silverman on paid leave. Now, BuzzFeed reports that there were two allegations within this initial complaint. The first concerned that David Silverman had not disclosed financial and personal conflicts of interest relating to the promotion of his book, and the appointment to a senior position of a woman with whom Mr. Silverman was allegedly having a sexual relationship with, and that appointment was rescinded. Again, that's BuzzFeed reporting. On April 9th, the board of directors placed President David Silverman on leave pending the review of allegations brought against him to the board's attention. Now, at this time, it's interesting to note that we haven't heard anything about any sexual assault allegations. These are just internal allegations of American Atheists. Now, around this time, board members did receive additional information from two women individually accusing Mr. Silverman of sexual misconduct. On April 12th, the board unanimously voted to terminate Mr. Silverman's contract. After American Atheist announced the termination of Mr. Silverman, BuzzFeed News then posted an article detailing the sexual assault allegations, and that was on April 13th. Concerning the sexual assault allegations, the first allegation was that Mr. Silverman had sex with a woman named Rose in 2012 in exchange for a job. Now, Rose also alleges that she believes that she was too drunk to consent to sex with Mr. Silverman. Now, it's important to note Mr. Silverman vehemently denies these allegations. But Mr. Silverman does concede that he did have sex with Rose in 2012, but there was no quid pro quo for a job. And Mr. Silverman also maintains that Rose was not too drunk to consent to their sexual escapade. The second allegation is from Beth Presswood. Ms. Presswood is essentially claiming that she's a victim of sexual misconduct perpetrated by Mr. Silverman and has pictures of bruises from the alleged sexual encounter. Ms. Presswood also says that this encounter was non-consensual. Mr. Silverman vehemently denies these allegations as false allegations and states that he and this accuser also had consensual sex, and that the acts mentioned in the BuzzFeed article were also consensual acts between him and this accuser. David Silverman filed a complaint in New Jersey on July 1st, 2019. He amended that complaint on August 22nd, 2019, and American Atheist filed a motion to dismiss on October 28th, 2019. Now, let's read Mr. Silverman's complaint, understanding the timeline and allegations. Okay, so this is David Silverman, plaintiff, versus American Atheist, Nick Fish, Neil Curry again, and BuzzFeed. This is in New Jersey, Essex County, and this is a civil complaint. Now, the reason why you're looking at the complaint like this is because this is a pro se complaint, which means, somebody went and picked up these forms that they have at courts for people who don't have attorneys or you can't afford an attorney. You go pick up this form and you literally fill out the form and start your action. So it seems like that's what Mr. Silverman did. He just went to the court and filled out the generic form for his action. Now, this is the original complaint filed on July 1st. The complaint reads as follows. On April 12th and July 2nd, 2018, American Atheist, Nick Fish, Neil Curry, defendants, after having conspired to defraud me of my right to speak against the wrongful accusations that they promulgated, did wrongfully terminate my employment as president. Defendant BuzzFeed, so now we're talking about specifically about BuzzFeed, spread false and malicious accusations against me on the internet after giving me only a brief interval to respond. This demonstrates actual malice on their part in publishing these false accusations without regard of the truth. American Atheist then repeatedly defamed me by stating I was fired for financial impropriety. He then goes on to allege the harm that he suffered because of these actions, the ability to work in the profession anywhere, the assertion that he improperly spent money has halted his hireability anywhere in activism. He is no longer able to get a job in any position of authority, inability to work in an other profession, the implication by the company that he stole or embezzled money from American Atheist has made him unhireable as if he were a criminal. He has been unable to get a job anywhere, including sales and telecom, where he has ample success and expertise. Decreased ability to earn money in the movement because people believe he is a crook. Many of his fans have gone not because of the accusations of sexual assault, but because American Atheist, he puts AA, accused him of improper financial conduct. And this was signed June 26, 2019 by David Silverman. Now, obviously, it's not when this was signed, but when it was actually filed. And up top, you can see it says July 1st, 2019. Then Mr. Silverman certifies that there's no other actions and then demands a jury demand at the bottom here, which he signed. So this was the initial complaint. So this was Mr. Silverman's first complaint that he filed. Now we're going to see his amended complaint. This is David Silverman's amended complaint, which was filed on August 22nd, 2019. Now this complaint, as you can see, it's still against American Atheist, Nick Fisher, but he's crossed out that Neil Curry because he had it twice. He now adds BuzzFeed Incorporated, Beth Presswood, Matt Dillahunty, and Rose Sinclair. Now let's see what's changed in this complaint. So now he just puts on April 12th. So now he's taking out that July date and just put April 12th. American Atheist, Nick Fisher et al. So that means all these people. This is still the same. He added this last line down here. Board member Matt Dillahunty conspired with now ex-wife Presswood and Sinclair to tortiously interfere with my business by defaming and blackballing me. So he added that one last line and added that Beth Presswood, Matt Dillahunty, and Rose Sinclair all conspired to tortiously interfere with his business acumen. His harm is still the same as it was before. We've read these. These actually did not change. So he signed this on 8/14. Dave Silverman, there's no other actions. But he also here, something very interesting, he didn't ask for a jury demand for the second one. So the amended complaint is what the court's actually going to use to move forward. So here he's not asking for a jury demand. And here he's only using one date, which is April 12th, 2018. So all this stuff happened April 12th, 2018. That's about a year and 3 or 4 months before this was filed. So that's when, so these events happened in April. And that's what he's suing about. Now, it's important to note that this is a pro se complaint, and all that stuff that I just read were allegations, not facts, and they'd have to actually be proven at trial. So as best as I can read this complaint, it seems like there are about 3, maybe 4 allegations or legal allegations that he's put forward. One, that there's defamation. The second is breach of contract and wrongful termination. The third is tortious interference. And the fourth is not in the complaint, but something that David Silverman's been saying, this lack of due process, that the board of directors did not give him due process when they fired him. They just fired him for nothing. And that lack of due process is something that he's been going around saying.
I was given exactly 0 due process from my organization. The complaints came in and I was fired. After 22 years with the organization, after 7 years of being president, my board decided to the Board of American Atheists, decided that due process wasn't for me.
So now let's turn to American Atheists' motion to dismiss to see how they respond to these claims that it seems like David Silverman's put forward. Now, from what I'm understanding, his defamation claim is against both his accusers for accusing him of sexual misconduct. Then he has a claim against American Atheist for saying that he embezzled money. And then third, it's for BuzzFeed. And I'm thinking that's because they published the allegations that he considers to be false against him. And then he also kind of alludes to Matt Dillahunty and all these people conspiring to there's a lot there, but it seems like the defamation is for a couple of different things. One, the sexual misconduct allegations, the accusers, and BuzzFeed, because they both spoke about that. American Atheist saying that he was fired over some financial concerns. It's another defamatory statement that they've made. Now, it's really, really tough here because he hasn't told us what the defamatory statements are, so I can't evaluate defamatory statements that are not pleaded in his complaint, but I'm being generous and assuming these are what Mr. Silverman is trying to say in his cause of action. Let's look at why American Atheist believes that the defamation complaints should be dismissed. They say the plaintiff's defamation claims are barred by the state's 1-year statute of limitations because plaintiff pleads only a single date when the defamation was allegedly to have occurred, April 2018, as we saw in the amended complaint, more than a year before the file of this complaint. Further, the plaintiff fails to plead specific statements he contends are defamatory, or when or how they were published, which is true. You have to prove all that. So I actually went and looked up the law that they actually cited within this complaint, and the law says libel or slander. Every action in law, now this is again from the New Jersey statute that was cited in the motion to dismiss. It says every action in law for libel or slander shall be commenced within 1 year of the publication of the alleged libel or slander. So what that means is that Mr. Silverman has said April 2018 is when these defamatory statements occurred and when they were published, April 2018. He filed this claim being as generous as possible in July 2019. That's more than a year later. So this action is barred by the statute of limitations because he just took too late to file it. Now, we usually call it SOL, and SOL means statute of limitations, but it also means blank out of luck. And that seems what happened here. Based in law, the laws under the state of New Jersey, his defamation claims are time barred. Now, this seems ripe for dismissal because you just filed it too late. Now, the second claim that the motion to dismiss makes is that Mr. Silverman never tells us what the actual statements are. Now, he's alleging false statements, but fails to provide what those statements are. Now, remember the Nicholas Salmon lawsuit, where Nicholas Salmon actually put up 33 different statements that he believed was defamatory, and the court went through each statement saying why they believed they were or why they didn't believe they were not. Now, this is what you'd have to do if you were to properly plead an action for defamation. Here, there is no actual statements that the court can evaluate to see if they are defamatory or not. If you don't have the statements within your pleadings, you don't have a defamation cause of action. And without those statements, the court can't evaluate whether you've been defamed or not. As to Mr. Silverman's first cause of action, defamation, do you believe the court is going to allow us to go forward, or do you believe for the reasons made in the motion to dismiss that this claim will be thrown out? My opinion, it doesn't look like it's going to make it, but again, this is just an opinion. I don't practice in New Jersey, but it seems like if you're telling me the statute of limitations only give you a year, and you haven't told us what the defamatory statements are, it looks like this is a BS defamation claim and that it will easily be dismissed. So let's look at now the second claim that Mr. Silverman has put forward, which is the plaintiff's contract and wrongful termination claims. Now, simply put, Mr. Silverman is saying that there was a breach of his contract because American Atheist fired them without due process. Now, he's been saying that in interview after interview. No due process. They fired me. And now his cause of action is saying they terminated me unjustly in violation of my contract. So let's see what the contract says, because if his contract instills due process rights to the organization, then he's right. They can't fire him unless they follow those procedures set forth in the contract. And he's saying they violated that contract. So American Atheist actually put the contract in with their motion to dismiss. And let's look at the relevant clause. Section 10 of Mr. Silverman's contract states, A, that termination by the board. The board may terminate this contract with or without cause upon 10 days written notice. So it says here that Mr. Silverman's contract can be terminated within 10 days written notice, but it can be terminated for any reason. It says with or without cause. So that means that the board can just say, hey, we're terminating your contract. Now, it's interesting because when I have corporate clients who come into this issue where they want to terminate someone and it says they can terminate the person without cause, then I just say, don't give a reason. Terminate the person and just point to the contract. It says we can terminate you without cause. We don't have to give you a reason because the contract allows it. That's what happens here. And then you can actually see Mr. Silverman's signature on the bottom of the contract where he signs agreeing to these terms. So based on the contract itself, it seems to me that the due process that Mr. Silverman was owed was a vote of the board of directors to terminate him and 10 days notice. It seems like he got the vote, they terminated him, and the 10 days notice we don't know, but Mr. Silverman doesn't allege that he didn't get the 10 days notice. He just alleges a breach of contract, wrongful termination. So I need to ask you, do you think he was wrongfully terminated now that you've actually seen the provision of the contract? And does this cause of action, should it go forward for wrongful termination based on the contractual agreement that you've seen yourself? I don't know. That's why you guys are the jury. Last but not least, Mr. Silverman then goes on to just assert tortious interference. Now, this is really interesting because there are two types of tortious interference. There's one regarding businesses and there's one regarding contracts. And Mr. Silverman doesn't say which one that he's actually putting forward. So I think that generally it should be dismissed based on that. You know, if you're saying it's tortious interference, you should direct the court to which version of tortious interference you're talking about. Let me tell you about the two types of tortious interference. There's one for a business, and this is when false claims or accusations are made about someone's business or even personal reputation, and that leads to the loss of a probable, not possible, a probable future economic benefit or advantage from a relationship. Now, this is simple. This means that I'm losing some type of business opportunity because some third party has made some type of tortious something against me. You know, they defamed me. And if they've defamed me, and now this probable, again, it has to be probable. It has to be, yes, this was going to happen. Me and this person were probably going to come into an agreement. Now this person doesn't want to come into that agreement with me because of this tortious act, then that would be tortious interference of a business. In general, this is what tortious interference of a business is. Now, Mr. Silverman hasn't shown us that he had some probable economic benefit that was denied based on this defamatory conduct. He hasn't shown any of that. He's just said tortious interference. And that's one thing in pleadings. You have to tell us, you have to allege, in this context, you have to allege that you had some probable economic benefit or advantage that you were denied based on this defamation. And here, Mr. Silverman just hasn't done that. Now, the second type of tortious interference is tortious interference of a contract. Now, this is when an individual uses a tort, here defamation, to come between two parties who are in a contract. One party breaches that contract based on the defamation. So here, do we have a breach of contract? Well, Mr. Silverman was fired, but that firing doesn't seem like it was a breach of contract. It was, we can fire you without cause based on a board vote. The board voted, they fired him without cause. Without the breach of contract, it doesn't seem like you have this tortious interference. In both these claims, it just doesn't seem like tortious interference even applies. And he's applying this to Matt Dillahunty, Beth Presswood, and Rose Sinclair. How? Why? He hasn't pled enough to even make this argument. Now, let me read you what the motion to dismiss says about tortious interference. It says plaintiff fails to specifically identify a contract or protectable right which Mr. Dillahunty purportedly interfered, instead vaguely asserting that Dillahunty tortiously interfered with the plaintiff's business in general. He also doesn't tell how Mr. Dillahunty acted intentionally or maliciously to do so. He just vaguely says he tortiously interfered with a business interest. Doesn't tell us how. So this is just, it seems like I don't think this lawsuit is worth anything, but I can be wrong. Mr. Silverman now has an attorney that's going to be working with him with this. Maybe you can see something here that's, I'm not seeing, but it really doesn't seem like there's anything here that Mr. Silverman hasn't pleaded anything of substance. First, for defamation, statute of limitations for 1 year It was filed a year and 3 months later, so statute of limitations bars the defamation suit. Should it be dismissed? I think so. But again, what do you think? And number two, there was no defamatory statements to even allege. So it failed to state a claim that he can recover because he didn't put what the defamatory statements were. Next, breach of contract for wrongful termination. Well, did American Atheist wrongfully terminate his contracts? The contract says he can terminate them without cause. So they don't actually have to even give a reason. And Mr. Silverman hasn't sufficiently alleged how he believes there was a wrongful termination. The board voted unanimously. The contract says they can terminate him without clause. Seems like this one is a loser too. Tortious interference. It doesn't seem like he's alleged any tortious interference. It would need more facts, but based off what we have, where is the tortious interference? And this public charge of no due process, well, you saw the contract for yourself. He signed the contract that allowed them to fire him without cause by a vote of the board and 10 days written notice. So for you legal nerds out there who are going to kill me, the motion to dismiss also alleges two other things, but I'm only going to talk about one of them, is that the lack of personal jurisdiction over some of the defendants, like for instance, Beth Presswood and Matt Dillahunty, they're citizens of Texas. So they're alleging that the court in New Jersey can't haul people from Texas into a New Jersey court just because you feel like it. In the United States, courts have to have personal jurisdiction over the defendant. What that means is that I, who live in New York, if someone feels that I defamed them in Alaska, they can't go to an Alaskan court and file a defamation suit against me because I've never been to Alaska. So the law and the Constitution doesn't allow you to sue citizens from other states unless they've had some type of contacts with the states. Either I was employed there, either I work there, either I do business there. There has to be something that allows me to be hauled into an Alaskan court. Now, for Matt Dillahunty, it may be a little interesting because he is a board member of a corporation that is based in New Jersey, but they have some Supreme Court precedent that says that just because you're on the board of a not-for-profit in another state doesn't mean that the state can now haul you in to that state and be served for other actions, which is kind of happening here. But I think Beth Presswood and Rose Sinclair, if they don't live in the state of New Jersey, then this court doesn't have personal jurisdiction over them, which would make sense. And David Silverman's action would just be dismissed because the court doesn't have personal jurisdiction over people who don't live in that state. So the New Jersey court, even if he's saying that these defamatory matters happen, he would have to sue those defendants in the states which they reside, either Texas or wherever, or he'd have to show that the New Jersey courts have personal jurisdiction over them. But if they don't live there, then they really don't. You know, there's another way around it where if you're in the state and I serve you with process in the state, then the court gets personal jurisdiction over you. But I don't know if that's happened or not. So just for you legals out there, I've said legal, just for you guys who are interested in that, yes, they did make that argument, which I think for a couple of the plaintiffs is convincing. I want to see how that plays out for Matt Dillahunty. That's it for the presentation. Now this is up to you. You are the jury. Do you believe that David Silverman's cause of action is going to be successful? Or do you think it's kind of BS? I'm just being honest with you. It looks like a loser to me. It looks like a huge loser to me. I mean, it just does. Now, I am not practiced in New Jersey, so I just don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how things develop, but right now there's a motion to dismiss out there, and it looks like it's a very, very good one because some of the claims are just time barred. You know, you filed it after the statute of limitations ran out. It can't be defamatory. So with that said, for those of you who don't know, David Silverman is coming on the Magic Sandwich Show in a couple of weeks, and he's agreed to talk about these things. So, we'll ask him about, the timeline, the events. It seems like the sexual assault allegations came after the fireable offenses. So from just my own opinion, it seems like there were some complaints that happened before these sexual assault allegations came to light, and they seem to be investigating that and going to fire him for those reasons. And then these sexual assault allegations came out, and then they just terminated him. But they could terminate him without cause. So if he's going around saying that they didn't give him due process, well, that's just not true, because the contract that, as you saw, he signed says the only process that he was due was a vote of the board, and he could be fired for any reason. And that means no reason at all. That's what without cause means. So it seems like he's arguing that he wanted to be fired with clause, even though David Silverman himself signed a contract that said he agreed to be fired without clause with the vote of the board and 10 days written notice. It doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. But what do you think? It's about you. Do you think David Silverman has a winnable lawsuit, or do you think it's BS? So we'll ask him on the Magic Sandwich Show. I want to see if there's any more of these lawsuits out there. This one is interesting. This one is interesting. And it's interesting, too, because we're going to actually get to talk to Mr. Silverman about his cause of action and see what happens. Maybe he may not be able to talk about it because he's been talking about it. So I don't know. We're going to see. This is going to be exciting. If you've made it to this part of the video, consider subscribing to the channel because obviously you like this stuff. You made it to this part of the video, hit the subscribe button. My name is Nate, lawyer, YouTuber, and I just hooked you up.